Coach, the most successful leaders are also some of the most vulnerable. And that's one insight that our guest gave us today when it comes to leading by example with vulnerability that I definitely took away from our conversation.
Yeah, he had a lot of great insights. The one that really struck me was just a little bit different. Instead of fall down, get up, he said fall down and grow up. Listen to this episode and you'll learn more about that.
This is the Limitless Leadership Lounge, where Coach and John learn along with you from some of the world's most decorated leaders. Recently promoted, let's sharpen the saw together.
Looking for a fresh perspective on leadership development? If so, we have the man for you today as our guest. Andre Thornton is a keynote speaker and the CEO of the Whitman Consulting, who brings a fresh perspective to leadership development. Andre now inspires and teaches the principles of leadership through the art and science of the human experience. Andre performed on some of the most advanced aircraft programs and technologies in the world. He co-led the capture of a $1 billion in new business, led organizations as large as 2,000 employees, and numerous innovations over the course of an 18-year career at Lockheed Martin. Since 2016, Whitman Consulting has been a sought-after partner working with such companies as IBM, Verizon, Lockheed Martin, and many others. Without any further ado, Andre Thornton, welcome to the Limitless Leadership Lounge.
Thank you so much, Jim, for having me. And John, I'm so excited to jump into this conversation.
What's your new perspective on leadership development? How do you help leaders in this ever-changing world?
So I want to start with saying that everything that I'm going to share today, I myself personally wish it wasn't true because it's very uncomfortable. And as you read in my bio, I'm an engineer and I like things to be explainable, neat, logical, and leadership is the opposite of that. And I have learned that through research and through experience to be true. And no matter how many times I try to disprove everything I want to share today, I end up being wrong. And the science is what the science is. It's like gravity. They say you can believe in gravity or not, but either way, gravity believes in you. That's what I have found with leadership and the science behind it, which is fascinating.
So what is that science? Let's talk about what makes leadership so counterintuitive and unfortunately not so easily explainable.
Yeah, the science is interesting because you can understand it logically. Like I could draw a diagram. I used to work on aircraft and we would have processes in place to build an F-22, for example. And I could draw a diagram for you and I could explain to you what, leadership is and what you're supposed to do. The challenge is when you're in the moment, emotionally, it's not what you're going to feel like doing. And if I had to say, that was probably the biggest aha moment for me, was that just because it doesn't feel like the thing you want to do doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do. And the research backs this up. For example, if someone has just lost a job, the natural inclination is to try to quickly replace that job in that feeling of loss. That can lead to some very rash, sometimes not very good decisions. What the better thing to do, that is not necessarily what you feel like doing, is to take that time to pause and reflect and gain an incredible amount of clarity on what it is that you really want to do and see all of this as a gift, and then go find the next job, because then the next job becomes something that is potentially life-changing as opposed to just finding another job.
Very interesting. I'm curious, you talk about the individual, and let's start with you and then how you work with your clients. You hear a lot about, and I'm very big when I talk to leaders on my leadership presentations, about finding your purpose or your mission. So how did you find your purpose and how do you help leaders find theirs?
My purpose was one of those things that has knocked on my door, and I think many of us have the experience, but there's a thing that they just either want to do or naturally do. For me, it was mentoring. I was just always mentor. I was the cousin and I still am, at Thanksgiving dinner with all of my family, who was going to corner my little cousins and, hey, all right, what's going on with your career? And I would not let them out of the corner until they gave an answer. It took a disruption in my career combined with a trip that I took to Africa, a mission trip that was completely unplanned. And this combination of the clarity that happened there, that started there, and then the disruption where I had to figure out a new thing because my position went away at the company, those two things created this really interesting formula that allowed me to sit back and reflect and really think about what it is, not only that I want to do, but why I want to do it. And that began the journey of what became Whitman Consulting and all this work that's happened. Now, the company's been around for 10 years, but 12 years ago is when that moment happened. So what we do with people is it's hard to get clear about purpose when we're busy. It's hard to get clear about purpose when everything that has been drilled into us since grade school is, what do you want to be when you grow up? What's the job? What? So what we do is we help people. We have a series of processes we take them through to not just understand their what, but to get clear on their why. And purpose is this really interesting connection between the what and the why and the contribution to the world that we're able to help people find. And it's been great. It's been a journey. And it's also been not only for those leaders, a sort of game-changing experience, but also for their teams, because they're able to then pass that on to their teams.
Andre, I guess dig deeper. And obviously, you don't want to give your business model because people need to hire you. But give us a little insight of like maybe one step you help leaders with in trying to get clarity.
There's a couple of exercises that we can do, and they're intended to be reflective. One, for example, if you haven't defined your values, we'll help people define their values. Really simple. There's a lot of information out there about that. We'll help people define their strengths. And we call these strengths what you can't not do. Like, what is it that you're really good at and you love to do it? And then we combine that with the contribution that they want to make. And we think of that in terms of what does the world need that, you feel is important. And when you take those three pieces of information and you have people reflect on that, and then you do something like give them an exercise where, for example, there's two ways that we do this. One is you have someone draw a line and you have them write at the end of that line, the horizontal line, on the left, you write the word birth. On the right, you write the word death. And people go through that and you're like, okay, wow, why am I doing this? And then the next instruction is place a dot on the line where you think you are today. And that kind of first just recognition of our own mortality, along with, oh, wow, where am I on the line? Along with, hey, you know what? Everything to the left of the line, there's nothing I can do anything about, but everything to the right, I can completely control. And I have no idea really where I am on the line. You combine all that together, and then you start asking questions about what people want to do next and why, and you get some really interesting clarity.
Wow. That's a powerful exercise. And when we're talking about purpose, so as a person of faith, that's where a lot of my purpose comes from in life. That's important to me. And purpose is a difficult thing because there's a lot of questions about, can it change throughout your life? If you maybe don't believe in a higher power, how do you have purpose in your life in that sense? Tell us, like, how individual do you feel purpose is versus how formulaic do you think you can help someone find their purpose?
Yeah, this is a great question. And this is why you can't just ask someone what's your purpose and expect them to just have an answer,
Right.
because it really is, it's different for everyone. Some people are, as I am, Christian, and a big part of my process was very spiritual. There was a lot of prayer and there was a lot of clarity that came from that. Other people have different belief systems. And that's why we have a sort of range of different ways to help people reflect. And the reflection is an interesting combination of whether you believe in a higher being or not. You have this version of you based on your values, your strengths, your natural tendencies and desires that is there. And we can question why it's there and who put it there with the belief system. But when everyone realizes that we all have the same sort of blueprint of a set of things that makes us who we are, our value, strengths, and the things that we care about, then it doesn't matter if they have the belief in the higher power to get to the same answer. And, it's not with the exercise I just took you through, for example, it's not that it's one session, I just have the conversation, people walk away with a purpose statement. It is based on that individual's belief system in their experience and what they desire to get out of understanding purpose, because some people don't care about purpose, for example. We triangulate on what is the right data set of self-awareness for them to have to then be able to connect that to some direction of purpose. And that's actually the way I talk about purpose is it's not a destination, it's a direction. And so with that triangulation, regardless of a belief system, we found that it's interesting. We're all humans. We all have some of these same basic blueprint things. And when we gain awareness of them, because they sit beneath the surface in our subconscious, when we illuminate them, then for everyone so far, it's been, oh, wow. Yep. Okay, that's the direction. I've always been heading that way, but now I really want to intentionally head that way.
Very interesting. Andre, I got to change our direction just a little bit, mainly because I was an athletic coach. Basketball was my number one love, but I coached numerous sports in my 35-year career. And you were a Division I athlete at VMI in both football and track. And I'm curious because football is considered a real team game, where track, although you do have a team score, I ran track as well, it's really more of an individual sport. Can you share what you learned about playing both those sports at the Division I level that's helped you in your leadership?
Oh, wow. Such a great question, especially the combination. If I had to sum it up, track is this really clear, really measurable process of self-development
Mm,
and mastery that regardless of what event you do in track, there's a measurement associated
right.
with it. And how you did from meet to meet or competition to competition. And the world knows. It's funny, I ran track in Virginia, and my son now, he's 10 years old, he's running a little league. And last year we were on this app, and I found my track, my time from 1994 in
Oh,
this
Wow.
wow.
app. The measurement is there, and it's so finite, and it gives you such immediate feedback on if you're improving. So I see that as the self-development, really powerful self-development sport. And then football, oh my goodness, you're counting on this other group of guys basically to keep you from getting killed. And there is no, I have a buddy who coaches now, and I was talking to him about this, and we were looking at these connections between leadership and sport. And what he said was so true. And I've been away from the game, so I forgot about it. But he said, what happens is, so let's say a corporate room, people are trying to build teams and build trust and everything. And he said, what happens with football is there's a locker room, there's a two-a-days camp, there's a whole set of experiences and observations that the teammates get to have of each other. Who's willing to really leave it all on the field? And you learn that before you learn if this person has a wife, what their religion is, what their political beliefs are, whatever it is, you learn that, hey, they have that same quote unquote dog in them, and you
Mm,
respect them for that. The teamwork and the connection with others, and learning how, even though in track it's all about primarily, unless it's a relay or some other joint venture, it's all about you in track, but in the sport, it's incredible. And then when you have that victory, and the other thing about football is you get to go back and watch the tape. You get to see who did what, and there's that's not very forgiving. There's several Sunday mornings that we would sit, and the tape tells the truth, and
yes, it does.
you also learn a lot about your teammates watching that tape, both good and bad, but mostly good. So the team experience is incredible, but then also the personal development and being able to know if you're getting better is great with track.
Yeah. But as an engineer by trade, as somebody who you'd assume you're more like STEM minded, you're probably really smart, but the stereotype of those people is that they don't love to step into leadership positions and have all the conversations with people about helping them find their purpose. Where does that overlap come in your leadership journey from when you went from somebody who's very focused on the detail oriented, the math, the numbers, versus somebody who's willing to have these deeper conversations?
I was, this is right after I started the company within the first year. and I'm out meeting with different people, and I've met with this HR director, and we went to lunch, and just my first time meeting her. So we're probably having a pleasant conversation, maybe 20 minutes into it. And then she just stops and she says, "Oh my gosh, I need to bring you in because our engineers will listen to you talk about emotional intelligence where they haven't listened to me because they know that they can relate." And that actually became a really strong sticking point for me as a business owner. And then ultimately to grow the business was realizing that there is this logical engineer mind that for a long time, I myself would sit in a leadership training talking about emotional intelligence and thinking, this is a waste of time. I've got work to do. I've got real work to do. So I can empathize with that. But I've also now, because I've taken this passion and turned it into a business, I also now can explain to them with very specific data and research why the emotions matter and how they will get the outcomes that they are so focused on getting. So again, and I open the same way I did here today. I wish this wasn't true. My engineer brain wants this not to be true. My engineer brain wants everything to be logical and simple and to not have to worry about the emotional reaction of people and how to manage that and how that's messy and illogical. That's not what I want. But the data says what the data says. So I actually get to lean back on the engineering mind of the data is what the data is and science is what it is to help people with the more sort of art leadership stuff.
Yeah, I gotta say, Andre, I wish likewise, just like you, as soon as I got married, I got a pretty good lesson about how not everything is logical and true, right? And so sometimes I'm right there with you with that engineer mind of why can't we fix this? But no, it's different for different people, right?
Yeah, I often say, especially at marriage, do you want to be right or do you want to be successful? Because those are likely two different things.
Right.
Letting go of that need to prove right from wrong is one of those uncomfortable realities of leadership and of marriage. Really interesting and fascinating. Been
Yes.
married, actually, we'll celebrate 25 years, God
Wow.
willing, this September. So
Congratulations.
we could have a whole nother conversation about
I
it.
know. I could learn a thing or two from you, that's for sure.
You're in between us because I have 43 and John has just a couple. So but yeah, that's great. Hey, Andre, when you talked about football, and this is something I challenge leaders when I do leadership presentations, is trust important? You brought up how essential trust is. Can you share a story with working a leader, how you help them build trust? Because it's so important, but I don't think people, they believe it's important, but they forget how to really build it each day.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've found there's a several trust building activities and exercises, and I actually wear this shirt that I'm wearing today because it describes the thing to do to build it the fastest. And I have literally been in a room and seen what happens when, for example, we have an exercise, we've got the leader of the team and the team, and the exercise is to basically share your story, share your life story, or to share anything that's personal and vulnerable. And I have seen it happen both ways. I've seen it happen where the leader did not speak first to share, and others shared, and the exercise fell flat, and then the team went on as it went on. I've seen where the leader went first, and the opposite extreme, where they shared something that no one on the team had any idea about them. And it was very personal and very vulnerable. And I've seen how that initial opening created the safety for everyone else. The entire team, in just a matter of minutes, has gelled like they never gelled in the years before that working together. And then I've seen what happens after that, which is everyone is just a little bit looser, a little bit more willing to say they messed up or they don't know the answer or they need help. And it's tremendous. It is so interesting how powerful just one moment of vulnerability, the right kind of vulnerability. I'm not saying it's not just anything. There's a whole other conversation around what
Sure.
to share, but vulnerability, particularly when it comes from the leader of that team can just illuminate trust throughout it.
I gotta share just a quick story. And if you're watching on YouTube, you saw Andre's shirt said "Be vulnerable," and if you're listening on audio, that's what it said: "Be vulnerable." It's a great shirt. I gotta share a quick story because I've been going to church all my life, and when I was a youngster, I was in this little group of church people, and the leader talked about the importance of being vulnerable. And one of the questions he brought up was, what's one of the things that you've done that you regret in your life? And he talked about the leader talked about taking 11 items in the 10 item or less checkout line. And I thought to myself, come on. And then sure enough, every answer after that was like something very, very small, very not really that vulnerable. But a similar situation actually just happened last year when I was in a different church group, and the pastor, who was the leader of the group, talked about being addicted to pornography. And after that, the followers, the people who went after him, just opened up so much deeper than the first group where the leader talked about the checkout line, right? So that's the power of being vulnerable as a leader. You have to lead by example. So what are you talking about, the right kind of vulnerability? What would you say, because obviously you don't want to share every deepest, darkest personal secret that you have, but what might be some examples of ways that we could be more vulnerable as leaders?
Yeah, there's the personal side, there's the professional side. Another just quick aside to this that's also interesting is trust is a combination. Stephen Covey has a really powerful definition in his book, Speed of Trust, combination of character and competence. And what we're talking about here with the vulnerability is character, but we can't forget about the competence. So, for example, if someone's vulnerable moment is basically something that's going to expose that they have no idea what they're doing and they shouldn't be trusted to do the work, that's not going to help. But what does help, and so let's keep with a sort of professional example, is someone sharing maybe a mistake that they made, something that they did horribly wrong professionally, and then what they learned from it, and then the growth that happens after. So now, this thing happened, but I can be trusted with credibility to do the work. With personal things to share to create vulnerability, I have found like the example you just gave, John, is great because that's one of those, oh wow, you just wouldn't have expected not only that to be the fact, but especially for the person to be willing to share it. And the fact that they're willing to share it means that they're acknowledging it and they're working to overcome it or they have overcome it. And it's okay to have things like that, that I'm working to overcome. Personally, it depends on the crowd. In a work situation, I had someone tell me, this is a colleague, and he worked at a large company, and I won't share the name of the company or the name of the colleague because the company it's a household name. And he said the CEO of this company would, on their Zooms with the entire employee, all hands, would cry. And he did it often. He said people were expecting it. And he said it was tremendous in what that did for the culture. Just imagine this is a Fortune 100 company household name, and you've got someone at that level willing to share that amount of vulnerability with an entire organization. How the statement is, I'm human, and it's okay to be human, and humans are not perfect. So as long as that is the come away from it and there's no damage, it's only upside, I think that's how you choose what to share.
That's a great point. Andre, we've had people with all different levels of education, and I've never asked this question. We've had people that have doctorates and masters and all that good stuff. But I know you have an MBA. I'd like you to share your thoughts because we try to help young and emerging leaders. Is it something you think is worth pursuing, getting a master's of business administration?
Wow, what a great question, especially in this day and age, right? With AI and everything.
Yeah,
Because when I came up, it was you have a technical bachelor's, get an MBA. Like that was the formula.
yeah.
And what's interesting now, does that still matter? My answer to that would be if you're interested in understanding business, then absolutely yes.
Okay.
Things that I learned in the MBA were foundational. And it's not that I remembered everything, but I had a new level of comfort in talking about business, in talking about finance, and talking about accounting and marketing. And really, it was the comfort in being able to talk about these things. So if you don't And I'm actually in a space now with AI. I think everyone, if there's a thing to do right now, it is to figure out how to think like a business owner, whether you're going to become an entrepreneur or not. And a part of that is learning business. So whatever your domain is, if you don't get a formal MBA, because there's other ways to learn about business, what the MBA does is it structures it for you in a really good way. But if you don't get the formal, then make sure you get exposure. And particularly the topic, and I found this throughout my MBA, I switched my concentration. It was information systems at first, and I switched it to finance because that's the topic. Everything else I think is a little more easily learned outside of the formal structure, but the finance that's the gasoline of any business, and to understand it and not be intimidated by it, I think is just extremely beneficial.
And I gotta also ask, because Virginia Military Institute, then Lockheed Martin, right? Yeah, you have to have some experience with the discipline and the different style of leadership. What, from your perspective, is the difference between like military and civilian leadership, and how can we learn things in the civilian world from military style leadership and vice versa?
Oh, yeah. So I'll start with some of the what in service may learn from the commercial world. I've got a friend who retired, and he retired as a colonel, and he said after he was like 2 months into his civilian role that it's a lot harder to LEAD when the employees, can leave, LEAVE. And I thought that was such a profound statement and so true. And he went back into, so when I had command, like everyone, they had to listen to me. Like it's by law, they have to do what I say. And now I'm in this space where they don't, and it's a different skill. On the flip side of that, so I think that's something that those that are in service can learn. And then the flip side of that, and my immense respect for the military, obviously you said VMI and then doing the work with Lockheed Martin and just so many friends. My father's a veteran. I think that there's a regiment and a discipline to everything that's done in the service that sometimes is missing in the private sector. And that regiment and that discipline and that structure, I think, is the way you build anything, a business, a car, whatever it is. And that structure is sometimes missing. I've seen in different organizations, and there was a thing that I think would be great to pull, it would be that, because it really is effective. It gets things done. It's repeatable, and people know what is expected of them, and they deliver it. And that is a work of art, especially to do that over so many people. Think about how many people have ever been in the military and for how long, how many years.
So, Andre, you brought up a book you're working on. Share with our audience a couple of gems that they would get if they read the book.
The book is 184 pages, 12 or so chapters, and there's so much information in there. And so it's these gems, like what are some of the big ideas that is now fun to think about how to talk about. One of the biggest that really is wrapped throughout the entire book is this concept that I call fall down, grow up. The idea is that when we fall down, the natural inclination is to get up. And we hear that every time you fall down, get back up. Another thing we hear is bounce back. Something sets you back, you bounce back. What I offer in the book is when the fall down happens, it actually creates an opportunity for growth. It's not there just to build in this ability to deal with adversity. That's part of it. But it's also, there's something within this fall down moment that you can learn that will actually make you better than you were before. So instead of bouncing back, you're bouncing forward. And after falling down, instead of getting up, you're growing up. And when I look back over my life, and I talked at the beginning about the job situation, there was so much growth that happened after. And there's several examples of this in my life where things didn't go as planned, but then the growth followed it. Throughout the book, think of that as like the theme. And now, how do you do that? The stabilizers are built on how do you find your footing when things don't go as planned and you've fallen down. And then the final two sections of the book are moving with purpose, which is figuring out what it is that you want to go do, and then lifting others as you rise, which is basically how do you get others engaged and inspired around you. So it's almost another way to put it, if I had to summarize the book, is the stabilizers are to help you get grounded and figure out what you want your life to be. And then the next three chapters are about moving with purpose, which is figuring out what you want to do and why. And then the last four chapters are how do you bring others along with you in leading. And each of those chapters and concepts is built on the science, and I remind you again, science of what I wished was not true, because it's hard and it's illogical, but it's backed by science and research, that you basically have to do the counterintuitive thing within each of those steps. You may not feel like growing up, but this is how you can grow up anyway and turn this into a gift. It's not going to feel like a gift when the fall down happens, but this is how you turn it into one.
I gotta delve down because I love the fall down, grow up concept. Can you illustrate? You said you had a number of stories. Can you just share one story with our listeners about that concept?
Yeah, there's so many different stories and situations. A lot of times I'll focus on me personally, but I'll share a more work-related one that
Okay.
was interesting. So I was in another country. I had a job, and our role, we actually were selling airplanes in different countries. And we had 11 days to basically get there and get this contract negotiated and signed. And on day 8, we hit an impasse with the customer, and it was like there was no way we were going to work it out. So while we were back at the hotel, we hadn't given up, but we had just, okay, we tried 11 days. That's an incredible test. And so we started to just play around with crazy ideas on how to get this impasse fixed. And one of the crazy ideas was this whole thing about this thing called letter of credit. And there's a guarantee that whatever is supposed to happen in this transaction is going to happen, and a bank that usually puts that together. So we had this young person on the team, and we started throwing around ideas. And she said, why would a bank guarantee it? Why wouldn't we just guarantee it? We're worth more than a bank. The company is. And at first it was a silly idea. And then we just started, and that ended up being the foundation of the idea that we went back in with the next day. And we got the contract signed on day 9. That's an example of, you run into this challenge, you run into this moment of, oh my gosh, it didn't work. Here's an obstacle. And when you loosen the reins, this is what's not intuitive, you loosen the reins enough to allow yourself to tap into the part of your brain that is creative, which again is not what we naturally do. And you do that as a team, and you don't ridicule each other for bringing up bad ideas. Instead, you just allow a sort of joyful, playful conversation and energy around it. And voila, we come up with something that works. And that's a magical moment that is something that can happen in most situations, but we just don't provide the space for it. This was a $250 million contract. There was
Wow.
so much pressure. The idea of even telling our bosses back home that we were just joking around in that moment was not, but we were literally at the end of it. We're not going to work, so we might as well just throw around. And so that's an example. I've seen tremendous time and time again results and outcomes that happen when we just release this need and this control factor and let things evolve.
Again, it's counterintuitive. So much of leadership is counterintuitive. I wanted to go back to one thing before we wrap up, Andre, about the previous points that you had made. Really, what it sounds like you were saying is that you're most qualified to serve the people who you once were. And Ed Milet shares a powerful story about his dad getting sober and the person who helped him get sober, who was only qualified to help him get sober because that person was also an alcoholic. So sometimes it's those things that we feel disqualify us actually qualify us. Do you feel like that's also oftentimes part of somebody's purpose, is the scars and the what they think actually disqualifies them ends up being part of their purpose?
Oh, John, now you're ready to come teach a class. Absolutely. And I love the way you put it. It actually becomes the material to teach. Whether we make a decision to start a company around it, like I did, or we just choose to share the stories and experiences with family members or people in our community, everything that's happening to us is to give us the material to teach others with. And there is nothing more fulfilling than that. I love the way you described it.
For our YouTube watchers, they obviously see this, but for our audio listeners, Andre has two big posters behind him, one with purpose and the other one is time. And I'm going to want to delve into a little bit of time. I got to tell you a quick story. So one of the things that my reputation as a coach is if you couldn't be on time, you had to be early. And I'll never forget, last year I was flying to a speaking engagement and I met a couple of people that went to my church. And one of my former players that I coached 40 years ago was working part-time at the airport. And he came up and talked to me. And the first thing he said to this couple that I was talking to was, Coach, I'll never forget the time I came late and I didn't come late again. And that's something I learned. But I'm curious because time is essential in all people's lives. Delve into why you have that behind you and what your thoughts on time, whether it's being on time, using your time wisely, whatever angle you want to use.
Yeah, the definition there is the most valuable thing that we can either give, waste, or spend is what time is. And one of the stabilizers is called the 1440 method, based on the idea that there's 1440 minutes in every day. We all get the same. And how you spend your days is how you spend your lives. And that concept, first, the finite number, and then realizing that, okay, how my life is going to go is really just a series of how my days go, caused me to reflect on how do I become more intentional, not about just what I want in the future, but how I'm spending my time today. And I've built an entire framework around how to do that. And it became the beginning of everything that else that's in the book and everything that's been built in my business. So you have this framework and you look at these minutes, and a lot of times I'll ask people 1,440 minutes in a day. What would you say the percentage is right now that you are spending of that time actually creating the life that you want? And for many people, it'll be a pretty low number. And so what this framework does is that we don't have time to go into it, of course, but it takes people from, let's say, a 20%. And when I started, I was probably at about 30%. And now I'm at 90, 95% is my
Wow.
answer. And with the intentionality and a few engineering minded frameworks and reflective questions like we talked about earlier, we can get really close to 100%.
Yeah. Wow. And that's part of the benefit of working with you and given your experience and your purpose. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But my final question for you, Andre, before we wrap up, I don't want to overlook the fact that you and I and Coach, we share the same faith. And that is foundational to how I operate in daily life. And I know you too. I used to put faith and leadership in two different buckets, but I've realized that there's so much overlap and they inform each other. So tell us, how does your faith help inform and inspire what you do in your leadership journey?
Everything that I do, I pray before. Everything in the relationship that I have with God, I turn to Him for direction on everything from the beginning, from starting this company. And it's really interesting when you have that kind of faith, the kinds of actions and decisions you'll make. The job that I had at Lockheed Martin was going away, and I had the option to try to find another job in Lockheed Martin, which was there. I would have had to move, but it was there, or do something else. And I had been at the company 18 years. And March of 2026, two
Or
really interesting things
2016,
happened.
you mean
Well, I'm
2016?
sorry, yeah, 2016. Two really interesting things happened that month. On the 15th of that month, my son was born. And on the 31st of that month was my last day at the company after
Oh,
18 years.
wow.
And to say I was able to make that decision with absolute faith and clarity and no hesitation and haven't looked back since is, I think, probably the best sort of testimony of my relationship with God.
Wow. That
Well
is,
said.
that's amazing because that's scary, especially with a newborn. Wow.
Yeah.
And you've been at it for 10 years. How do we work with you?
Yeah, I am primarily, I've been working with businesses, so it's a B2B model. But with the release of the book, what we're doing is we're reaching out to the masses. So if anyone's interested in connecting with me, you can go to my website, which is andrewhitmanthornton.com. There's an N after the R in Thornton. Sometimes that gets missed. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook the same way. And what you'll find when you get there is the book. The book is there, but there's also a way to contact my team. And I'm happy now to work with individuals as well, whether it's coaching, we can come in, I do keynotes, do workshops, but you can find me there. And this book and the concept of it is new, so it continues to evolve. And I expect there'll be some more offerings probably you'll find on the website in coming months.
Disrupted is the book, and you can find that and learn more about Andre. Links down in the show notes. So scroll right down and head on over to Andre's site. Get in touch if you want more Andre. I kind of want more Andre, to be honest with you. But
Me
thank you,
too.
Andre, for your time today. We can't appreciate the insights you shared enough. It was so much fun.
Thank you guys so much. This has been great. Y'all make a great team. I love it.